Thanks for having me here with you this afternoon. It's great to be here. As the video said, my name's Simon, and I don't need to introduce myself because I did a very handy job of doing that. And ostensibly, I get asked to talk about technology. I say ostensibly because I think the interesting thing about technology is that it's really at the exposure layer of something more fundamental that's happening in society and culture at the moment. We see a lot of fantastic innovation around us in the world today. We see disruptive stories about Uber, for example, and what it's doing to the taxi market. We see the iPhone and Android devices and all of these fantastic innovations, and they all look like technology. The interesting thing and the message that I'm here to share with you today is that they aren't technology. Okay, there's something more profound going on. You see it as technology. That's where it presents itself. But if we think of it as technology, we're making a mistake. And what it's really about is human behavior. It's about societal change. And it's about the way that business has evolved over the last 8 years. And I'll tell you in a moment why I say 8 years. But it's an interesting place to start the discussion because I spend a lot of time in the financial industry, where I deal with big corporates, and they kind of they think they have a problem with digital. They see all of this technology disrupting things. They see apps from providers like Discovery, and they go, well, apps are cool and technology is cool, and that's what we need. And then they come and speak to people like me and say, we need help with our digital strategy. And I say, well, I can't help you with that because I don't know what that is. Do you have an oxygen strategy? Let's talk about that, right? Because oxygen's part of the way the world works. If you don't know how to breathe oxygen, you die. There, simple. So there's your strategy. Learn how to breathe oxygen. What's more important is your business strategy. And once you've got that figured out, you can pretty much assume that the oxygen will be there for you to breathe as you go about executing on your business objectives. Technology is the same thing. Let's presume it will be there. Let's presume that if you don't use it, you will die. But let's talk about your business, and let's talk more importantly about your customer, because the profound things that are happening in the world today have very little to do with our tools and very much to do with the people who are using those tools, how they engage with each other, and more importantly, how they engage with information in the world around them. And that's where things get interesting, because we are fairly magnificent as organic machines that process information. We've evolved amazing tools for doing that. We've become very good at taking information in from the environment and in processing that information. And we're pretty sure about ourselves as well. We rate ourselves pretty highly. When we do tests in behavioral economics about what we call planning fallacy, we find that there are two things true of any human being starting something new. They think they're going to do a lot better than they probably are, firstly, and they are way sure of their own abilities than they may be. So, simple thing, I mean, we've just seen some optical illusions. Here's another one, not quite as magical, but it makes the point well enough for my purposes. If I ask you to look at those two surfaces over there, marked A and B, and I ask you if they're the same color, at first glance, unless there's something wrong with your eyes, you should tell me that they certainly aren't the same color. But what I want you to do is close for most people it's most comfortable with your left eye, but whichever eye you prefer aiming with. I'm going to assume you don't all do target shooting very often, so you might have to switch them around to see. But take your right index finger, or your left, whichever again is more comfortable for you, and kind of hold it up in your line of sight. Put it towards your open eye until you've blanked out. Do I have lasers here? No. But until you've blanked out that fat section in between those two blocks. So you've essentially blanked out the horizon line. You can pull your finger as close as you want it. And all of a sudden, you should see those two colors changing in your vision. Is everybody seeing that? Those two blocks are in fact the same color. But it's rather simple, as our friend just showed us on the stage, to make people see things that they aren't really seeing. And we can go into Photoshop, in fact, and I can drag an image mask over those two surfaces for those of you who do have something wrong with your eyes, and you can see, you can see that I'm not lying. Or maybe this is the illusion. Now, this stuff is kind of obvious, right? We've all seen optical illusions, and we've all been flummoxed by them. The interesting thing, I'm going to show you that video in a moment. I actually only do this so I can show my home videos, because nobody else wants to see. But we make these mistakes all the time. And for decades, there have been people who've become very good at unpacking how we make these mistakes and the thought processes and behavioral processes that go with them, and using that to their advantage. And we call these people salesmen. And they don't always know that they're doing it either, okay? But there are fantastic books written about behavioral sciences and how one can apply them to sales. Some of those books have less obvious titles, like Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Dan Ariely's a bit of a rock star. You may have read his book, Predictably Irrational. It's a fascinating field. And they talk about the mistakes we make with math all the time, for example, as well, and how when you're in that fast-thinking hot state, you kind of slip up. And a simple example is a simple math sum I'll present to you. And instead of thinking about the answer, I just want you to shout out the first number that comes into your head, because one will. So if I tell you I've got a bat and a ball, it can be a cricket bat if you prefer, and together they cost 110 Rand, and the bat costs 100 Rand more than the ball, the number in your head for the price of the ball is 10 Rand. That's what most people say. It's the wrong answer. Okay, the ball costs 5 Rand, the bat costs 105 Rand, the bat is 100 Rand more than the ball. 5 Rand is half of 10 Rand, so it's a pretty significant mistake to make if you're making a purchasing decision about that ball on the spot, potentially. Our friend the salesman knows this very well, especially if he sells cars. Those are my favorite examples, because when you're standing in front of a 500,000 Rand BMW and the salesman says, hey, 15,000 Rand for you, and I'll throw in a GPS. Sounds like a great idea when you're spending 500,000 Rand on a car to spend only 15,000 Rand on something you get for free on your phone or for 800 Rand at Hi-Fi Corporation. Okay? And salesmen know these tricks. He'll also offer you leather seats perhaps for 5,000 Rand. What a bargain, 5,000 Rand for leather seats. But picture yourself at your favorite furniture store purchasing a couch for 2,000 Rand and the salesman going, hey, 5,000 Rand for you, make these leather couches. What is he smoking? 5,000 Rand for leather seats is ridiculous. When the seats cost 2,000 Rand, but when they're around a hunk of metal that costs 500,000 Rand, all of a sudden, this looks like a great equation. So salesmen have used this to their advantage for a long time. What very few companies have done is used behavioral science to actually help people live a better life. And that's really what's driving the kind of innovation that people see coming from companies like Apple and Google and Uber and Facebook, and we can name a dozen at least. They see it as a technology thing. The real innovation is that for the first time, somebody's giving us stuff about the person at the end of the equation that we novelly call the customer. I remember Microsoft did a marketing campaign when they launched Office 2013, and they said, designed for human beings, which of course begs the question, who the hell were you designing your products for before, right? But that was the corporate world. It's kind of eluded us that our customers are, surprise, surprise, human beings. So let's talk about human beings. This one's 2 years old. It's my son, Kian. And this is the first time he ever saw the iPad. I had been to Florida, and I bought this iPad. It was one of the first ones on the market at the Millennium Apple Store. And this is the first time Kian's using a computer at the age of 2. And he doesn't seem to be sickling very hard, hey? And that's the power of a product that was designed for the end user. Now, I'm assuming you all have iPads. Do you remember when Steve Jobs got up on stage and made history by announcing this product? Do you remember the year? What's the guess? It was 2010. April 2010, he got up on stage and announced this product that we're now pretty blasé about. It's a mere 4 years ago. And if we look at what's happened in that time, it's quite interesting to notice, again, from a societal and cultural perspective, what the impact has been, more than from a technology perspective. So this is one of my favorite games. It's called Spot the Cell Phone. I do get excited about things with blinking lights and gadgetry more than most people. But let's play Spot the Cell Phone, but let's first set the scene. It's 2005. This is the scene outside the Vatican. You haven't seen this slide today yet, eh? Whew. It's one of those consultant slides that everybody has. Okay, scene outside the Vatican. These people are waiting to find out who the new Pope is. And if we play Spot the Cell Phone, we can see a Motorola StarTAC, I think, in the bottom right-hand corner, and one or two others. And they were pretty one-dimensional devices back then. The cell phone was used for communications. You could talk through it, or you could send text messages. And the people pioneering the industry, like Eleanor Craig back in the 90s, were told that at the height of the market, they would sell 400,000 of these things in South Africa. And that was the world. They sold considerably more of them by 2005, but still, that's what the scene was outside the Vatican. There was a more recent announcement of a pope, that being last year in 2013, so let's skip forward there, and let's play Spot the Cell Phone again. All right. Now, I'm not a professional anthropologist, but it seems to me that something changed pretty fundamentally in the 8-year period between the announcement of two popes. That's the world we live in right now. Okay, children seem to see the world like this. They've got something in their frame of view all day long. And that something is pretty profound. It's an information nexus. It connects us to an outsourced brain that we call the cloud, and it gives us superpowers in a way. But it's also made us an extremely distracted species because there's more information floating around in the world around us than we can possibly hope to consume. And most of it is pornography and videos of cats. Okay, that's the internet, right? 90% of it. We know there's some good stuff out there, but good luck finding it amidst all the rubbish, all right? And we've learned some clever tricks in terms of processing this information and getting it into our faces, pretty close often. This is one of my favorite examples. It's a Wi-Fi connected scale. Do any of you own one of these? Yeah, so you connect it to your Wi-Fi network, as that gentleman knows. This particular one is quite special because you can also teach it your Facebook and Twitter accounts. And then every morning when you stand on the scale, it tells your friends how fat you are. Automatically, all right? So lots of interesting experiments happening in the world of technology and behavior at the moment. But some important things are happening because until now, this whole information society, this severe distraction that we've developed as a species has been rather challenging for us. And the problem is that we've kind of experienced it as people looking for information, okay? The equation was a fairly simple one. Since the dawn of writing about 6,000 years ago, what our species has done is produced information and gathered it together. Between us discovering writing and 1 AD, we roughly doubled the amount of recorded data in the world, which was quite a good trick. But between 1 AD and the Renaissance, we repeated the same trick in 1,500 years, exponentially taking all of the information in the world and doubling it again. In the 500-year period between the Renaissance and the year 2000, we then again exponentially took all of the information in the world and doubled it. Between the year 2000 and 2010, we did the same trick with way more information in a 10-year period. And next year, we will have repeated the same trick in a 5-year period between 2010 and 2015. And at that point, if you believe guys like Raymond Kurzweil, who I'll talk about in a moment, we begin doubling the amount of information in the world in a minute-by-minute basis. Lots and lots and lots of pictures of babies and cats and lots of pornography, okay? Because most of it's rubbish, right? But the upload rate of that rubbish at the moment, if your YouTube, is 100 hours per minute. Upload rate. That's not how much video is consumed on YouTube every hour, every minute. That's how much video is uploaded to YouTube. That's how much YouTube grows by every minute, 100 hours of video footage. So we're very good at recording pictures of cats and putting them on the internet. But what's happening to these information systems that are dealing with all of this load for us? If we go back to the 90s, this was Google in 1999. I suppose all of you will remember this interface. And it very definitely felt like I was a human being looking for information, which I entered into the search bar. And if I asked Google a question like, Google, what's the time in Japan? I would have gotten some index search results. I would have gotten information about Japan. I would have gotten information about time zones. I would have gotten everything except what the time is in Japan right now. I would have had to figure that out for myself. Google's come a long way since then. If I go to Google right now and I say, Google, please tell me what the time in Tokyo is, I don't even have to hit enter, and it already figured out that I want to know what the time in Tokyo is, and it tells me. And I say, thank you very much, Google. Tell me what the weather in Johannesburg is like. And Google gives me a 5-day forecast because it knows what I'm looking for. Thank you, Google. Tell me about my flight this afternoon. And it'll tell me all about that flight. And if I'm in America, it'll even tell me the terminal and gate of the flight. And that little airplane will move through the air as the flight happens if I happen to have this open. And I can say, Google, please do really difficult math sums because I'm bad at them, and Google will just give me the answer and a calculator in case I want to do really difficult math sums, okay? That's how far Google has come in the last, let's call it 10 years or so, which is great. Thank you, Google. You're awesome, but that's just the beginning. Now, I mentioned the name Raymond Kurzweil earlier. He is the computer scientist that we can thank for computers understanding natural language, which is the trick you just observed, part of the trick. He founded Nuance Software, which was the first company that ever taught computers to understand natural language. It's the reason you can use Siri on your iPhone today, for example, is thanks to Raymond Kurzweil. He also wrote a book called How to Create a Mind. That's his most recent one, which I can highly recommend. But long before that, he popularized the term singularity. for when we get to that stage where the information is doubling on a minute-by-minute basis, and really the cognition we're seeing emerging in our information systems eclipses the capacity of the human brain. And for a long time, people thought Ray was a little bit crazy and that he must have really enjoyed himself in the 60s. But 2 years ago, he was put in charge of engineering at Google. So people don't laugh at him anymore. And when you ask him what he sees his job as being, he says, and this is my reading of it, but it's the same thing, he's curating the world's biggest brain. Because in a very real way, Google is now a brain. There's cognition in that information system. It's thinking very hard. And what is it thinking about? Google is thinking about you, okay? And Google is developing eyes and ears as well, because brains are very handy, but if you don't have sense organs connected to them, you can't do very much with them. So Google is developing the ability to see the world around us. And it uses that to develop context about you as a human being. Now, Google already does a greater job of seeing some things than I can. For example, the traffic in Cape Town. I'm not allowed to swear at corporate events, but there's a lovely word for the situation on the screen right now. Okay, I'm the blue dot in the middle of this situation. Now, Google can see what the traffic in Cape Town is. I can't see that. I haven't evolved the ability to sense what the traffic is in the world around me, and I probably never will. I don't think that's something our species will learn to do, but Google has learned to do that. It can see that sort of thing. And now it can show me that information. So I know I'm a little bit screwed if I leave the office right now. And when you see that kind of thing, and you know that I'm the blue dot in the middle of it, you develop a context about me. And so you may have heard the industry jargon for this, which is contextual computing, which is where, for the first time, the information starts to find the human beings. It's not about the human being searching for the information anymore. It's about the information searching for the right human being. I know what the traffic is in Cape Town. I know that Simon has a meeting. I know what time the meeting is and who it's going to be with. I know that this information is now relevant to him. So it's about a segmentation of one. And I deal with a lot of, again, financial companies that are used to segregating in vast swaths. They have their customer heroes, which, you know, this one person, imaginary person, that is supposed to describe a population of like 5 million, a demographic. Doesn't work that way anymore. And companies like Google know that. They can segment down to one person. The next logical step, and bear with me because things get a little bit cuckoo, is then you can be that person. You can start taking the kind of decisions that they would make. And the thinking goes as follows. If I know enough about you, and I've developed enough context about you, I can start unpacking your behavior. I know that Tim will react in a certain way to a certain situation. I know that Tim has a 99.9% certainty of ordering chocolate cake after dinner tonight. I probably know what fund he's going to select. Where's my responsibility in analyzing the quality of that decision? I don't know. But we're moving to a world where we reckon by around 2017, these contextual computing engines will know you well enough to start taking these decisions for you. If I know you're on a way to a meeting and I know you're going to be late and I know you're meeting with some people, why don't I just go ahead and be your PA and let those people know you're going to be late, right? And we can do this already. Do any of you use Google now? It's available on the Google iPhone app. You can get it. It's baked into Android. And the experience of it, I mean, it takes a bit of PT to set up, but it blows you away the first time you see it. So I was asked to test it. Samsung had just launched a new version of one of their Galaxy devices. It was one of the first that had Google Now on it. When I first started using it, it just asked me if I'd like to do it, and I said yes and forgot about it. The next day I arrived at work. Actually, it was 3 days later. Arrived at work. My phone pinged, and there was a question that said, "Is this your office?" So I said, yes, it's my office. That's a cool trick for Google to do, but a fairly obvious one. It sees me, you know, sitting on Facebook looking at pictures of cats for half an hour every day at this location. So that's probably where I pretend to work. And then I got home that evening, and the next question was a little bit more disturbing because it said, "Is this your house?" Okay, yes, okay. This is my house. Nothing strange about this. I'm sure it all ends very well. Next morning, having cornflakes with Kian, who you met a few slides ago, and my phone starts beeping, and there's a message from Google saying you need to leave 15 minutes earlier for work because traffic is picked up along your regular route. That information has found me. Now, the part that blew me away wasn't so much the traffic and the timing, it was the regular route bit. Because I'm an ex-Johannesburger, I think they're called, I forget, who now lives in Cape Town. and lives in Constantia and works in the City Bowl, instead of like a sensible person driving on the M3 straight into town, I drive around the mountain and check out the ocean and just like a typical volley on the way to work. Google's learnt that my dumb ass takes the long way around, and it tells me what the traffic is like on that route. It doesn't tell me I'm being stupid and I should. So there's a fine balance here between understanding the context and making the right decisions for the person and what information that brings with you. But as I said, I'm sure it all ends very well. So why am I telling you this? Well, one of the companies, and this was how we were invited to speak today, that I work with, is called 227. We were acquired by Old Mutual a year ago, but don't let that put you off. I'm an advisor to the company. And we develop tools in this space that aggregate transactional data. We bring it all together in one place. So retail store accounts, check accounts, credit cards, investment products. We support 10x as well. We can aggregate 10x portfolios, bring that into 227, and we show people their money in an aggregate level. And now we're starting to deliver these contextual insights on top of that data that kind of align with what the Googles of the world are doing. So if you have an interest in this stuff and how it's being applied to the world of money, then I invite you to check out 227. We also find that some of the advisors that we've worked with find it indispensable in their dealings with clients to get a sort of an accurate handle on what they're really spending. Because one of the challenges we have with human beings is that we don't know what we want. So in the old days, if you were trying to get your head around the customer, back to the beginning of my talk, we're not talking about the technology, we're trying to understand the human beings. In the old days, you do the world's worst idea of gathering information, which is a focus group, and you'd get a group of people together and you'd ask them what they want. And that would work fantastically well if people knew what they want, but of course they don't. And so Henry Ford had the famous quote of, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Nobody would have said a car, because guess what? Cars didn't exist. The work of an innovator is a little bit harder than that. It's about understanding that faster horses isn't the wrong answer. It's expressing a need, and if I'm going to meet that need effectively, I need to work a hell of a lot harder than trying to design a faster horse, because the answer needs to be orders of magnitude better than that if it's going to have a real impact on the human beings engaging with it. That's the key to innovation. That's the difference that needs to be made. The other important thing to acknowledge is that people are weird, okay? Individually weird, uniquely weird, in ways that we're only now starting to understand. I wish we had more time to unpack exactly how weird human beings are, because in the last 2 years, there's been some in-depth research that's been done into how your culture impacts on your cognition and your behavior, and the results are fascinating. Some of the optical illusions that I use work only on the Western mind, we're now finding out. In people who have, get this, grown up in rooms that have or squared off rooms with corners. So we don't have time to get into the science. It's fascinating, but the sand people, for example, who grow up in environments where everything is very natural and their houses are round, don't get fooled as easily by the kind of optical illusions that fool a North American college student, which are the great guinea pigs of the West, who we do all of these experiments on and then just assume they apply to everybody. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. But in 1979, two gentlemen, Daniel Kahneman was one of them, and his partner Tversky, won the Nobel Prize in Economics. And they won the Nobel Prize in Economics as psychologists. Now, psychologists don't often win anything in economics, okay? It took some doing. But essentially, this is what they did. They showed the world that people are weird, and that the economic model we've been using until that point assumes that we are all rational automatons that make the right decision when confronted with information. And the truth is that that is just absolutely false. They won a Nobel Prize proving this, and you know what it changed in the financial industry? Squat. We still apply the economic model that a Nobel Prize was awarded to the gentleman proving its falsity for. We still apply it every day. And so I look forward to my work in the industry because there's a lot to be done. But I want to leave you with that thought. You know, the other kind of question I get, never mind digital strategy from these big companies, is we need to educate the market. Which is about the most arrogant thing you can say, right? These poor people, they're so stupid. If only they understood our product, they would buy it like hotcakes. Let's rather try and let the market educate us, because that's where the magic lies. And if we don't get that right, we have some friends on the west coast of the USA who will swoop into our territory and devour our lunch by doing that for us. So thank you very much. That's me.